Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni's on-set partnership has turned into a Hollywood legal nightmare. From harassment allegations to a bitter defamation war, the drama behind It Ends With Us is more than just a movie plot. And a lot of people are making comparisons between this case and the infamous battle between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Tell you what, Johnny Depp's lawyer Ben Chu is going to join us right now to talk about it. Well, in the escalating legal saga that has captivated Hollywood and maybe the whole nation, the once promising partnership between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni has turned into a bitter legal battle. The two co-starred, they collaborated together on the highly anticipated movie It Ends With Us, based on Colleen Hoover's best-selling novel, which hit theaters last summer. However, behind the scenes, tensions between Lively and Baldoni quickly escalated, leading to accusations of a smear campaign, public fallout, an ongoing lawsuit, and it all began when Lively filed a complaint against Baldoni that later matured into a lawsuit, alleging that he sexually harassed her and then orchestrated a smear campaign against her when she brought her allegations to his attention. And Baldoni then filed a countersuit alleging Lively, along with her husband Ryan Reynolds and her publicist Leslie Sloan, that they all defamed him. And he also accused them of civil extortion. Well, yesterday, Lively and Baldoni's legal battle escalated in court, where their attorneys met for the first hearing in this very high-profile legal dispute, and this trial date has already been set for March 2026. So to break all this down, I want to bring on a special guest. We are joined by celebrity attorney, litigator, who famously represented Johnny Depp in his high-profile trial, watched by the entire world, Ben Chu. Ben, thank you so much for coming on. It is great seeing you. Now, Ben, we haven't talked about this before, and the first question I had is, and we're already seeing this online, there have been a lot of comparisons between this case and the Johnny Depp Amber Heard legal saga that unfolded in 2022. There is a big difference here, practically. We won't have cameras in the courtroom for the proceedings and potentially an upcoming trial for Lively Baldoni, this federal case. But why are we seeing the comparisons? Why are people making the comparisons? And do you think those comparisons ring true?
Jesse, thank you for having me. It's great to be here and to see you again. I think there are some comparisons. You have on both sides, you have prominent actors, which you had also in the Depp case. I think the stakes are a little bit different in this case. In Johnny's case, he was suing for defamation. He was really suing to get his reputation back. It was more of an existential issue for him, a challenge that we had, and I think the other side had, but I think they really have it in this case, is to convince a jury of lay people why they should care about a dispute between two very powerful, successful, attractive actors. And I think that's a challenge, irrespective of the serious nature of the allegations.
That's very true. And look, the allegations that were leveled in Depp v. Heard were very, very different than what we're talking about here. Hey, everybody, I do want to talk to you about the first pre-trial hearing in New York Southern District Court. So Blake Lively's team was requesting a protective order to essentially prevent Baldoni's team, and maybe more specifically his attorney Brian Friedman, from making public comments about the case. And we're learning that this hasn't necessarily been granted. The judge basically told the parties to follow the rules here. There was initially, it was an idea of let's come up with a protective order by March 11th. But it seems what the judge has said is more specifically, be careful of the out-of-court statements that you make because you don't want to materially prejudice a case. You don't want to taint the jury. What does that mean for these attorneys? What does that mean for Brian Friedman? Will he not do more interviews? Will he not do podcasts? What's the line between speaking publicly about the case and regurgitating what your claims are and what your defenses are versus crossing the line?
Jesse, it's such a great question. So let's unpack it because they're different issues. Putting aside whether there's a protective or gag order in place, as you well know, you always want to be careful as an attorney to say strident things or to go too far, because even if there's no gag order or protective order in effect, judges tend not to like to see attorneys mouthing off or becoming strident, that there's only one star in a courtroom and that's the judge. Then you have the issue of whether there is a gag order. In my experience, I've been on both sides of this issue. Judges are loath to impose protective orders or gag orders because the very nature of court proceedings is that they are open to the public. And any restriction on speech is anathema. I had one case which I thought we had a very compelling case for a gag order, and the court said, no, at least not now. not until we get closer to trial. Now, as you know, once you get within the proximity of trial, once the jury summonses are going out, judges tend to be more receptive because of what you said a moment ago, which is the danger of tainting the jury pool. So I think as we get closer to the trial date, I think the judge might be more receptive to granting some form of gag order. But when you're out several months from trial, I think most judges tend to be leery of protective orders. Now, there is one protection, and this is the third bucket, I guess, in response to your question. And that is lawyers always have to be careful, and they sometimes forget in their zeal to represent their clients or to promote themselves, they come up with some kind of dramatic quote. And attorneys need to be careful that even in the absence of a gag order, it might upset the judge, or it could even subject them to defamation liability, that they can say almost anything they want to in court, but once you step outside of court, you can be sued for defamation just like anybody else. And that can also get your client sued. It can also get you conflicted.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. And I know there's been talk about the litigation privilege, and you should be able to say what you need to say. I did think it was interesting. The judge said that he would accelerate this trial date, currently scheduled for March of 2026, if they violate the rules. If they start, going past and saying things they shouldn't say. Can a judge do that? Would a judge do that?
A judge has enormous powers. Yes, I think a judge could do that. I mean, that's a somewhat draconian penalty to accelerate and would leave the judge open to criticism. It also might hurt the court itself because the court wants to have an interest in fairness and wants a smooth trial, and accelerating something too much might be cutting off the judge's nose despite his face. So
Yeah.
that seems like an interim threat to hang out there, but not, I would think the judge first would go to lesser sanctions, maybe monetary sanctions, or a gag order or an enhanced gag order, threat of contempt. I've seen that before, where a court will hold a contempt finding, hold it in abeyance, which is a pretty big sword to hold over a lawyer's head.
Yeah, you don't want to be facing that. Okay, so I have a lot of things I wanted to ask you about. The first thing I also had to ask you about in relation to this was what happened over the weekend. So Baldoni's team, maybe more specifically Brian Friedman, creates this website. They launch it. It's called thelawsuitinfo.com. And posted on this, one is an amended complaint, and the other is an alleged timeline of relevant events that includes a ton of text messages and emails to and from pretty much everyone involved in this case. I thought it was really interesting before Monday, before a hearing, to determine whether you're making inappropriate out-of-court statements and whether or not you might be silenced, to post all of this on a public website for everybody to see. And that's where you list this new amended complaint. I thought that was pretty bold. You think that's a good idea? Wise decision? What do you make of that?
I agree. Bold, aggressive, chutzpah, whatever the right term is. I think it is very aggressive. Usually, you would not do something like that before a hearing, but I'm sure that they vetted it carefully. They vetted the material carefully. Certainly posting a pleading doesn't seem to me to be out of bounds. These are pleadings made in the public records. Whenever you're getting into work product or advocacy pieces, then I think, it's getting closer to the line. So, but it's a novel approach, a bold approach.
So I mentioned that if you look at the court of public opinion right now, and I can't say this across the board, but I would say a good portion of what we're seeing is a lot of people siding with Baldoni. In fact, when we did a live stream yesterday of this court hearing, 96% of our followers sided with him, 4% with Blake Lively. And then again, we did an episode on the celebrity reactions, and a lot of people in Hollywood are supporting Blake Lively. There's a division there. Based on what we've seen so far, and I gotta tell you, we've seen a lot what might make its way into a trial. Text messages, audio messages, video evidence, other images, metadata. Who has the stronger case right now? I know that's tough to ask. Who do you think has the stronger case? Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively, and I am curious, how are they going to prove their respective claims?
Well, I'm going to remain agnostic as to who has the edge right now in terms. I think you're more knowledgeable about that than I am. I do think that the more they can cite to audio tape and videotape. I think that is particularly persuasive evidence because everybody can see it. And I think it's much more impactful than just assertions, certainly assertions of counsel. In the hierarchy, I think text messages, whenever you can hang someone with their own language and they're in a position of having to explain that they didn't really mean what they said, you know the cliche, when you're explaining, you're losing. So I think on both sides, whenever they have actually used videotape, audio tape, or used the actual words of the other side, I think that that's a good day for them.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So, most recently, we now have these never before seen text messages that Baldoni apparently exchanged with Ryan Reynolds. And remember, Baldoni is suing Ryan Reynolds and vice versa. And they are now on this website. So, these messages are dated back to February of 2023. They're before all the drama started. They appear to be one of mutual respect. So, the messages allegedly from Ryan Reynolds read, "You've been a wonderful collaborator with B," meaning Blake Lively, "and that means a great deal to both of us. Being a stand-up person is everything, and you've been just that since day one. Thank you. I'm excited for you to work together. I'm excited for Blake to crack open her creative piggy bank with someone as dynamic as you. This is going to be incredible. I happen to adore you, Justin." Now, we've taken that apart a little bit. There's a lot more to this. We've dedicated a whole other sidebar to that full message. But basically, Ben, you had Justin Baldoni reaching out to Ryan Reynolds, fanboying a little bit. Basically, "I hope we could be friends. You know, I've never had a close female friend who's married." Blake Lively, he says, reached out to his wife, so he reached out to Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds was very, very, respectful and kind to Justin Baldoni. He did ask if he could adjust the shooting schedule a little bit so that Ryan Reynolds could be with his family. There was a part of this where I look at it two ways. I'm curious how you look at it. One way could say, look, we're putting this out there. Look how much praise Ryan Reynolds is asserting towards Justin Baldoni. Look how respectful Justin Baldoni is. Is he the type of guy that's going to sexually harass Ryan Reynolds' wife, make her uncomfortable, and then launch a smear campaign against her? And the other way of saying it is Ryan Reynolds a little bit in these messages by emphasizing how great it is that you're working with Blake Lively and how creative she is and how lucky you are? Does that support Justin Baldoni's argument that this is laying the breadcrumbs maybe for Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively to take control over the film? So there's a reason they wanted to get it out there. It seems like there might be something beneficial to Justin Baldoni. Do you see it that way?
Yes, I do. I think anything that shows him being cordial and correct and normal, I think is evidence, certainly that he can cite to say, look, I'm not the kind of person who would make somebody's wife uncomfortable or any woman uncomfortable on the set. On the other hand, I don't think respectful communications between parties before the fact really count against that person. Right. In other words, it almost gives more. We had a witness in the Depp case, for example, who was very praising. He said very nice things about Amber. She was nice to me. She paid attention to me. I think the other side was surprised because this was our witness. But later on, after, what was maintained where the false allegations were made, he said, I couldn't talk to her anymore. And I think that made his testimony more persuasive because this is not somebody who always had it in for this person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it does.
I think you really have to differentiate time periods. So it's quite possible, even what you would expect, for the two of them, the husband and Baldoni, to be friends.
Yeah.
The key is what happened after. How did his reaction change afterward? If your wife comes and tells you that she's been sexually harassed, you would expect the husband, Ryan Reynolds, to have a very different reaction for a lot of reasons.
And they can make the argument, Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, that he betrayed us. We reached out, we were kind, and look what he did. Or they'll say, they've presented text messages that would suggest that he was trying to reverse the narrative later on to make Ryan Reynolds look anti-feminist. There's actually a text message for that. Talking about that, let me just go to Lively's claims for a second, because she alleges that after she brought forth her claims of unwanted touching and inappropriate conversations on set, she says she was allegedly retaliated against by Baldoni and his team in the form of that smear campaign aimed at damaging her reputation. And one of the most scrutinized text exchanges appears to show the Baldoni PR team allegedly celebrating their success in crafting negative stories about Lively, and it centers around an article from the Daily Mail titled, "Is Blake Lively Set to Be Canceled?" So you have Justin Baldoni's publicist, Jennifer Abel, appears to text his crisis manager, Melissa Nathan, saying, You really outdid yourself with this piece, to which Nathan appears to respond in part, that's why you hired me, right? I'm the best. And of course, another exchange that Abel appears to say, Justin Baldoni wants to feel like she can be buried, to which Nathan seems to respond with, you know we can bury anyone. Now, this is important. Lively's team has pointed to these messages as evidence of a coordinated campaign to tarnish her reputation. Baldoni says that those texts are taken out of context, that it doesn't show the full messages, it doesn't show the full meaning, and that he didn't organize any kind of smear campaign. But again, when she launched her lawsuit and she had, through a subpoena, all of these messages, do you think her claims about a smear campaign against her are maybe the strongest part of her allegations, or what do you think?
It could be, and that is one of the inherent problems. I mean, we're all taught to be very careful on text. We tell our children to be careful on text because these things are emails. These things are all forever. You can't really erase any of this, and they can be taken out of context in a weak moment or a joking moment or just a boastful moment. We might be inclined to say certain things that we haven't thought through. So it's an argument, if another one were needed, why we all have to be more careful in what we say, particularly what we put in writing.
And he has also made the argument, look, all the allegations about what I was doing on set are false. And even if I had agreed to a 30-point list of demand from Blake Lively about changes that need to be made on set, like no more showing nude photographs or videos, I'm saying I didn't do any of that stuff, but I will agree to move forward, to acquiesce, to move forward with the film. That it could be a very interesting point of conversation. But he's asserted that these allegations really, and the smear campaign, she's deflecting blame for her torpedoing her own career, that she made tone-deaf comments and marketing of the film. And according to Baldoni, Lively fabricated accusations of a hostile work environment and sexual harassment as a means to smear his reputation, to shift the public's focus away from what she did. And this is what's interesting. As part of his push to bring everything out into the light, Baldoni releases the raw video from a scene that he and Lively were filming together, where she accuses him of being inappropriate. He says she's the one who breaks character and doesn't seem to be uncomfortable, and she made comments about his appearance. Ben, have you seen the footage? What do you think about that footage? Who does it help more?
I have only heard it described, so I don't want to speculate about that, but it does kind of circle back to my original point about the risk that they both face, because they both are well represented and they both can make cases in support of their respective positions. And so there's a real danger, may not happen. One side may fully persuade the jury, but there is a danger that the jury could essentially hang, or that there might be some on the jury to say directly or indirectly a pox on both of their houses. Again, it goes back to the issue of whether they can really convince the jury as to this serious, and there are, as you pointed out well, there are very serious allegations here, but I also think there's a danger of them meeting in the middle and some people on the jury just saying, look, these are two wealthy, attractive people. I don't know what to do here.
And you know, talking about that digital evidence, the Daily Mail recently published a nearly 7-minute voice note that Baldoni allegedly sent to Lively at 2 a.m. And in the message, he can be heard apologizing. And to provide a little context, it was to apologize for what seemed to be his hesitancy to accept the script changes that Blake Lively had made to a key scene in the film. And the voicemail reportedly coincides with text messages that Lively had sent to Baldoni shortly before this, in which she said, her feelings were hurt, that Baldoni seemed to only admire her passion but not her actual contribution. She talked about her insecurities. And it was also, by the way, around this time that Lively allegedly mentioned her inner circle of supporters, including her husband, Ryan Reynolds, and pop star Taylor Swift, who had seemed to back her work on the script, told Justin Baldoni to his face how great these revisions were. And he would say, I felt pressured to accept her revisions. I'm sure he would make the argument, I felt pressured to kind of apologize to her in this message. I was just trying to do everything the right way. The other way of looking at it, though, and we'll play a little bit of it in a second, the other way of looking at it, though, Ben, is she could say, he's calling me up at 2 a.m., talking about my body, talking about how he wants all of me, not to suggest this is sexual, but it's just a weird thing to do, and it's consistent with what she accuses of him. I want to play a quick voice note.
I want to start with an apology. Man, reading the second part of your message, my heart sank, and I'm really sorry. I for sure fell short. And you worked really hard on that. I am far from perfect. I am a very flawed man, as my wife will attest. And and I'm gonna up. I'm gonna say the wrong thing. I'm gonna put my foot in my mouth. I'm gonna piss you off probably, but I will always apologize and find my way back to center. And damn right, you got great friends if that's how you felt and they knew that. And we should all have friends like that. Aside from the fact that they're two of the most creative people on the planet, the three of you guys together, it's unbelievable. Talk about energy and just a force, all three of you. But I just wanted you to know that I didn't need that because it's really good and it's going to make the movie sing. I am so sorry you have been through what you've been through with these other filmmakers and producers or whoever the people were that you worked with. It just pissed me off. Those heads that, I'm just still kind of blown away that this is the industry that we're in and that you've experienced that as a woman. And I know I don't need to say it, but that's not at all going to be or will be. And hopefully it's not been the experience with me. There's nothing more exciting to me like that. I get to work with Blake Lively and have her, all of her. I mean, that's what I want. I'm going to stop rambling because it's been 6 minutes and 30 seconds. So, I'm sorry. You probably have kids all over you and a baby on your boob and you're listening to me ramble at 2 a.m. I hope you're feeling better and give Ryan my love. Thank you for sending me that. It means the world to me that you trust me with your feelings and your thoughts like that. And I can't wait to spend more time with you. Okay, I'm done cutting myself off. Good night.
So Ben, just real quick, what do you think about that one?
I think the timing of the call is unusual, unless this is something that they normally did. Communicate at 2 a.m. is for some usual, but for most of us, it's not. So I think the timing of the call, if she can say that, he's never called me at 2 a.m, kind of gives it a less favorable context for him. By contrast, if this is something that was normal, then maybe less so. I don't think apologizing per se will be held against him because I think it's a nice thing. It's a polite thing to do. If you've given offense, I think we've all apologized for things that we really didn't intend to be harmful. So I think he could spin that in a way, look, I'm just trying to go along to get along. And
Right.
yeah, I can see his side of that one.
Ben, I have to ask you about this other part, the lawsuit that Justin Baldoni filed against the New York Times, claiming defamation, saying they basically took Lively's complaint to the California Civil Rights Department as truth. They didn't do their due diligence. It was sloppy reporting. They even alleged that they conspired with Blake Lively to release this, that they looked at cherry-picked messages, basically asserted a narrative that was false. And in the new amended complaint, and right now it was consolidated, so the New York Times was a part of it, it includes some very intriguing new claims about the publication. So Brian Friedman, Baldoni's attorney, has previously suggested that the Times, as I said, was collaborating with Lively long before she filed her complaint. And in this new document on this website, they include what they say is metadata from the Times website, and it indicates that the outlet had access to Lively's complaint 10 or 11 days prior to it being filed. That if you look at the metadata, they were working on this piece, including imagery, days before it was published. Your thoughts on going after the New York Times and saying this was a coordinated effort?
As a threshold matter, Jesse, as you're well aware, suing a publication for defamation, under the actual malice standard, New York Times v. Sullivan, the burden is so high on a plaintiff. In the Depp case, for example, we did not give much thought to suing the Washington Post, which published the op-ed, because just the standard is so high. Even if the publication were deemed to be negligent, didn't do a thorough vetting, that's a defense. So having to prove actual malice against a publication in this context, as venerable a publication as the New York Times, it's an extraordinarily high bar to meet. Not saying it's insuperable. I've been involved in a case against a news organization before, but it's a very, very high bar. So you better have the receipts if you're going to do it, as opposed to going after the person who allegedly lied, because that, if you can prove the lie, then you've proven malice. But for the newspaper or publication, you've got to go that extra step, which is very hard to do.
And they also said that they didn't give them enough time to properly respond to that article before it was published, showing their bad faith, showing they were going to put down this narrative any which way. Before I let you go, Ben, I have to ask you about Ryan Reynolds. So he is named as a defendant in this action. And in Justin Baldoni says this is a guy who berated him, verbally attacked him, accused him of fat shaming Blake Lively. He tried to have his talent agency drop him as a client. And then there's this new part. So in the new amended complaint, Baldoni added this in, and there was a lot of suspicion about this, but now it seems to be confirmed in the actual amended complaint, that the character of Nice Pool that was portrayed by Ryan Reynolds in his movie Deadpool and Wolverine was actually intended to mock Baldoni. So according to the complaint, Reynolds portrayed Nice Pool as a vicious caricature of a woke feminist before concluding the character's arc with his violent shooting death at the hands of Lady Pool, a character voiced by Blake Lively. Upon information and belief, the Nice Pool scenes were added to the movie and filmed in January 2024 after the January 4th confrontation in Reynolds and Lively's apartment, and were intended to be a transparent and mocking portrayal of Reynolds' warped perception of Baldoni. Nice Pool commented inappropriately on a female character's attractive body after childbirth and excused his remark by claiming he identified as a feminist. Nice Pool also made reference to an intimacy coordinator and even used a hairstyle that mirrored Baldoni's previously longer hair. And we know that Baldoni has come forward talking about advocating for women and talking about being a feminist or a similar vein to that, and that certain the things that Nice Pool referenced were things that were going on allegedly between Baldoni and Lively. Talk to me real quick, Ben, about bringing Ryan Reynolds into this and adding this whole part of the Nice Pool segment.
Wow. I mean, it's really expanding the scope of the dispute. And again, you can understand why they might be tempted to do it. You can also understand that there's a risk there. A lot of people might identify with a husband defending his wife, so that there's a risk in going after him as well, because we all know how we would react under these circumstances. So I think there is risk on both sides. I think this is a fascinating case and will become more fascinating as it goes along. And the more they play into the media, I think the more pressure there's going to be on that judge. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he will end up saying, I'm going to expedite this thing. I don't want a circus. I want this thing over with. Yeah. So it will be fascinating to see this play out.
And it's really interesting taking these different pieces of evidence and characterizing them based on whose argument you believe and which context it goes. It's really an interesting case, and it's just getting started. Ben Chu, so good seeing you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Always generous with your time, Ben. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jesse. Anytime.
And that's all we have for you right now here